With Andreas Rogge, who is going to talk about why free software backup matters.
Yeah, so why does free backup software matter? And I'm not going to rant on anything. I'm just going to tell you how the impossible problem of managing commercial products can be downgraded to painful. So first things first, who am I? My name is Andreas Rogge. I'm co-maintaining a free backup software called Bareos for a living. Did infrastructure operations and lots of Linux consulting back in the day, and been doing Linux since 1995. So I hope I know what I'm talking about. So first question, why do we need backup? That's pretty simple. You need backup for business continuity. So there are ISO standards for that, saying you need to have the capability, continue the delivery of your services, and to be able to do that during a disruption. And so, but the too long didn't read is you somehow have to continue to work after things went wrong. What will go wrong? And I'm not going into detail here. Let's just agree on a lot of things will go wrong. Some things that go wrong can be mitigated or fixed by having a backup, like natural disasters, fires, things like that, security incidents, hacking attacks, human errors when you deleted the file you really need, technology failures, broken hard drives, or anything else. And now let's assume you already have a backup. You have some non-free solution that runs on-premise or something that runs in the cloud. That stores all the data relevant for everything that you do. That's integrated with each and every of your systems, and you have checked that this is actually restorable. The problem is you now have another service that is business critical. So what could disrupt my backup? The problem is everything. Now, you have to look at those risks because you have a business critical service and that has to run to be able to have business continuity. And in some areas, not a lot of areas, but in some areas, free software is better just because it's free software. You can mitigate some of the risks that you have with commercial software by using free software. So I picked the 4 things that I think are most obvious and that we have seen in the past few years that actually break for people. And that's not a technical problem. Usually it's not a technical problem. So the first thing that happens is the market shifts. So you have some vendor and they simply discontinue support for your system. And you still need that system. You have no way to replace it. You still need a backup agent, but you need to upgrade because you also have to back up your test systems, which are super new. A lot of cloud services, especially backup cloud services for private users, were just sunset with no migration path whatsoever. So you have tons of data in there, you have to get it out. Sometimes, especially for mergers, when one large company buys another large company, they find out, oh, we both have a backup product, and one of them is simply discontinued. And now, essentially, sooner or later, all the data you have stored is unreadable. So with free software, you're not at a single vendor's mercy. You can always host your own service when your cloud provider decides it doesn't want to have that anymore. And you have the data format specified as code, so you are sure that it's correctly specified. Maybe there are bugs in it, but the bugs are also in the data that you stored. The next one is supply chain disruption. So maybe your backup service just broke, but you have to restore some data right now. Maybe some of the critical operations that you did, maybe a backup, maybe a restore, whatever, failed. You call vendor support and they can't help you for some reason. Maybe you know a bug was fixed. Maybe you even fixed it in the upstream library used. But the vendor says, yeah, that's not critical for us. We are going to release that, I don't know, in March. So free software allows you to avoid exactly that vendor lock-in. You can run a multi-cloud strategy because even if there's nobody offering that product as a service, you can host that product as your own service by just going to another cloud provider. You can debug issues without doing reverse engineering some binaries, because you can just look at the source code. Maybe you can't, but somebody can. If the vendor is unwilling for a commercial product, you are out of luck. And last but not least, of course, it's free software. You can patch it yourself. What's also interesting and actually happened a few times is regulatory changes. So we have the CRA, for example, coming up. There were a few talks about that. What if your vendor doesn't implement those requirements? Are you going to continue to use that software? Are you going to switch the product? With free software, you can at least try to fix it yourself. Maybe you are in a country, or you are buying from a country that somehow decides you are not nice, or they are not nice, and there are export restrictions. And now your vendor is not allowed to sell to you anymore. That actually happens. So for free software, you can at least try to find a local contractor that might help you, or if you have the personnel, the people, and the drive, you can try to do self-service on that product. You can't do that with commercial products. It simply doesn't work that way. And another one, financial risks, which basically means, what could happen? So sometimes vendors just stop targeting your market segment. So yes, we don't do small businesses anymore. We only do large enterprises. You now have to buy an enterprise license, which costs 10 times what it cost before. Maybe you have a feature, and that feature is not well requested, not many people want to use it, and the vendor wants to get rid of it. So they put a huge price tag on it, so everybody who still uses it at least refinances the effort that he needs to put into that. You can't even blame the vendor for that, but that's a financial risk you are going to take. And last but not least, maybe a bit of the top two. Maybe the vendor changes the pricing model to something that's that's a huge disadvantage for you. So, for example, switching from volume-based, how many data you move, to storage-based, how much data you actually store. And here also, with free software, you have the freedom to choose another contractor. There's nobody ever going to take features away from you, because once it's free, they can't put it away behind a paywall. They can remove it, but you can just fork the previous version. So, short discussion. Most of these scenarios are valid for each and every software. So that could happen for every software. But for backup software, it's a much, much bigger problem, because you have super diverse platform requirements. Sometimes, as I said, you have to back up end-of-life platforms. Sometimes you have to be able to restore to an end-of-life platform maybe 5 years or 10 years after it actually went end-of-life. Because yes, you discontinued using the system, but maybe you have to restore data you had on that system back in the day. Also, you store a lot of data for a long, long time. Which means if you migrate, you have to move incredible amounts of data, which means you have a product lock-in, because you can't just switch products. They are all completely different. There's no single storage format that everybody is using. So you have the technical silos where you can't just move your data out of. So, and last but not least, if you find out that you can't disaster recover, it's hard to switch product in the middle of a recovery. So my conclusion is, vendor lock-in can and will be a serious problem. Some vendors sometimes are unwilling to provide what you need because it's not financially viable, because it's not what's on their strategy agenda or whatever. And sometimes they are simply unable to provide what you need, which brings us back to then you have a supply chain disruption. So the enablement that free software gives you, especially for not especially for backup, but in general, and is you can do arbitrary customizations if you require that. It's not easy, but at least it's possible somehow. You have data portability because you know in what format your data is stored. Maybe you don't like it anymore, but you can always read it because you have the code that knows how to read it. You can have vendor-independent support. Of course, I'm happy when the main contributors are the people providing the support and getting the money for that. But if they don't provide the support that you need, you have the freedom to move away, to fork the product, to find another vendor that supports the same product, which for commercial products, not possible. And finally, free software products won't suddenly cease to exist. So that's my conclusion why you should consider a free backup solution over a non-free backup solution. Thank you very much.
So we have time for a few questions. Anybody from the audience? Can we have a microphone here? Thank you.
Hi, thanks for the talk. So in your experience, do you think companies take into account this fact of using a cloud provider or an open source solution when they do like the risk management for their product, or they are completely oblivious to this problem of vendor lock-in?
So
they underestimate how big of a problem is.
So in my experience, the larger the companies get, the better the risk assessment is. We see stuff like, yes, we can't just run on a single cloud because that cloud provider might start to see us as a competitor and cancel our contract. Or maybe there's a payment issue or something like that. We had that ourselves, luckily just with a testing system, where fraud detection on the credit card that we also used to pay for the cloud service kicked in, and the cloud service payment was cancelled, and then our system, the cloud system we did test backups to, was gone. Of course we got it back, but first it was gone. And all the scenarios I had here, that's nothing I thought out, but that's all things that we've seen in the past, let's say 5 years, in better or worse cases. So luckily most people start to become aware, especially with the cloud transition. For cloud services, the risk management is pretty good, I think, but for on-premise commercial systems, I don't think there's a lot of good risk assessment, to be honest.
And maybe I will ask a question. And so for companies that do have a proprietary system that acknowledge these elements and want to transition to a free solution, what suggestions can you give them?
That's a good question. So let's just say when you're at the stage where you consider switching your enterprise backup solution, you should definitely look at free alternatives and don't buy from a small company, because it's not like I don't like small companies. I work for a small company, but commercial products tend to go away or change in ways you don't like.
Okay, thank you.
So I have a question for the audience. So who of you was hit by any of the things that I mentioned? Did anybody ever have a service disruption that was a real problem for the business? Nobody? Really? Okay, sorry, wrong question. Does somebody know someone who I think what's interesting is I think most technical problems are easy to solve, but these problems, these kinds of problems, are hugely or largely invisible and unsolved in a lot of organizations.